welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 179, and today's date is October 3rd, 2013. And the title of this episode is The Government Shutdown Game, What's the Real Agenda? And before I get started, I just want to welcome all those new people who are signing up on YouTube and all those new people who are coming to the x22report.com site. If you haven't visited the site, I do have many different pieces of information on the site. I keep a dynamic timeline of the current economic collapse, and that is under the tab Economic Collapse. I do keep track of different products if they're moving up or down to keep track of inflation or deflation, and you'll see that tab up top. I also put up different articles, and I comment on the different news articles that are coming in, and if you want to see that, you just click on Sentinel Alerts on that right there, or go to the home page and click on More Sentinel Alerts, and that will bring you to the full Sentinel Alerts that I put up there. And for all those people who donated, I really do appreciate it. Thank you very much for keeping the site going and paying for and helping out with the server costs and the antivirus software and the support people, and I really do appreciate it. And let's get into the economic collapse news. We're going to go out to Cyprus now, and we know that Cyprus had a bail-in plus a bail-out. They're doing both. They're still under capital controls where people still can't get their money out, and they're hoping to release those capital controls sometime next year in 2014. But what has come out is that Moody's is saying that Cyprus may need another $2 billion of capital, because what they received from the bail-ins, from the bailouts, is just not enough. And this goes on to say that Cypriot banks could need a further 1.5 billion euros of capital to cope with a rise in bad loans. And I discussed this in my previous reports, that a lot of loans in Cyprus are not being paid on, and they're seeing a lot of delinquencies and a lot of people just not paying their loans. Of course, you know, when you can't get your money out, the economy is tanking, high unemployment in the double digits. It just makes things very difficult. And we also see that the economy is contracting, and the country is not doing well. And we can see this in Greece. We can see it in Italy. Italy is having major problems. We see it in Spain. We see it in France. And we're seeing this all throughout the Eurozone. Even Germany's unemployment is starting to tick up. And each month now it goes up a percentage or two. And they're starting to feel it also. Now, here in the U.S., we're seeing that growth in U.S. service firms are slowing from an 8-year high. And this goes on to say that growth at U.S. service companies slowed in September from an 8-year high in August as sales fell sharply, new orders are dipping, and of course we know hiring is weakening. And they're seeing that a measure of sales fell around 7 points to 55.1, and indicating a much slower growth. And a gauge of hiring also dropped sharply to 52.7 from 57 in August, and that is another huge drop. Now, what's interesting, we've gone through many different corporations that are laying off people. We have seen Wells Fargo, Citibank, Bank of America laying off thousands of people. We see Siemens was laying off people. Merck is laying off people. And the list goes on and on and on. Toshiba was another one. We see retail stores closing retail stores, laying off people. And the people that are reporting, the news agencies that are reporting it, one of them being Reuters, who reports that the economy is doing well, that everything is improving, employment is getting better, is strangely cutting their editorial staff by 5%. And for these people putting out all this information that things are getting better, it's turning around, They're putting out the unemployment numbers, never questioning what the government says, just saying that the economy is getting better, is going to cut newsroom employees, and notices are going out this month. And this is going to be hundreds and hundreds of employees. And right now, Reuters employs around 60,000 employees. They have already laid off 2,500 people in the beginning of this year, and more layoffs are coming. Now, don't you find this odd that the news agency that's putting out the BS that the economy is getting better is laying off people? Now, I know we talk about the housing quite a bit. We understand that mortgage applications are declining. We understand that sales are starting to decline. They're right after the mortgage applications. We understand that huge investment companies are buying up housing using cash because 60% of the house purchases are made in cash. And what they're trying to do, along with the Fed, along with the banks, is pump up the housing market. And what we are seeing now is that the housing market has a vampire REOs where a half of Americans live in mortgage-free homes because what they're doing is they're hiding these foreclosures. And this goes on to say is that the scheme of these banks limit the amount available for sale inventories. And what's happening is the properties do not enter the foreclosure pipeline and are effectively kept out of inventory. Even the shadow inventory, and thus the distressed end market, the monthly drop in foreclosures has acted as a form of subsidy to the housing market and allowed the housing market to be pumped up. And what's funny is I do know somebody who has not paid his mortgage. The banks continually send notices, but he has been living there for 2 years in his home and has not, I repeat, has not paid his mortgage at all. And what they're saying is that a stunning 47% of bank-owned homes are still occupied by their previous owners who were foreclosed on. And on the surface, these houses look absolutely normal. The people are living in them, cutting their lawns like there is nothing wrong, and the banks are not doing anything because they do not want these houses hitting the market, because if they unload all of this, the entire market collapses. So what we're seeing here is that this whole entire housing market has been manipulated to get the prices back up. And I'm going to go back to my original premise. The government here in the United States, the Eurozone, UK, are all sitting here feeding all the people propaganda that things are getting better. Housing's getting better. The stock market's getting better. It continually rises. People are getting work. The unemployment is coming down. It all looks good. But what we have to understand it is that this is no longer a free market. The government, the Fed, are controlling everything. They are controlling it in a way so nobody understands what is really going on. Now we have to think, why are they doing this? Why would they control the housing market and tell the banks not to put these homes onto the market? Why would they give the banks money for their toxic real estate and tell them, do not loan this money out, but put it into the stock market? Why are they doing this? Why did they manipulate the unemployment numbers? Why did they manipulate the GDP numbers? Why recently did they completely manipulate the GDP numbers? Because the first manipulation wasn't good enough. So now they had to go all the way back to 1929 and recalculate GDP moving forward, so it is a positive number. Why are they manipulating the inflation numbers where they do not count food or energy at this point? Why are they doing this? Because they needed complete control to make sure everybody does not realize that the economy is about to collapse. This is the only reason. And they're still doing it, and they're continually pushing gold down because that would be a huge indicator that there is a problem. And if you notice, the last push came right when the government was shutting down, and they brought gold below 1300. Yes, it moved up, but what they'll do is when it reaches a certain point, they will push it back down. They do not want people to realize what is really going on. If people understand the jig is up, what they're trying to do is get everyone's wealth, get everything in order for this major collapse. And this is why all of this is happening. And this goes on to say that they're saying that the vampire housing in Miami is around 64% of the housing, Houston is around 65%, and LA is around 61%. And right now in New York, the metro area is experience a spike in mortgage defaults. So we see things are starting to come apart, but then again, they have full control and they will just manipulate it enough that it will not hit the corporate media, it will not hit the people, and they will continually to believe that things are going well. And this is a complete setup for the collapse. And I know everyone's sitting there going, well, this doesn't make sense. Well, just move back to around 2007, 2008. They did the same thing. The housing market was in turmoil. They knew it. They knew the subprime market was ripping apart and about to implode. They understood that AIG and Bear Stearns and all these companies were in deep, deep trouble. Now, just think about that for a second. But what did Ben Bernanke tell us? The subprime market is contained. He doesn't believe housing will fall because that's never happened before. He's also said in 2008, when the recession happened, the Fed is not forecasting a recession anytime soon. They are doing the same thing right now. They know what is coming. They don't want you to know. Now, Bill Gross is out there, and he is saying you should run for the hills. And he says, don't run for the hills because of the shutdown or the debt ceiling. Run because the economy is slowing by itself. So we can see that this entire market, which is controlled completely by the Fed and the U.S. government, is an illusion. We are, for a better word, we are living in a matrix, a complete illusion. An illusion. It is not based on reality. There is no free market. It has nothing to do with earnings. It has nothing to do with anything else except for the Fed and the U.S. government holding everything together to create this illusion. And this is why Obama was campaigning this summer to let everyone know the economy is recovering. The economy is getting better. Housing is getting better. He was out there in July and August campaigning to the American people to let them know things are getting better. Now, why would they be doing that? That's an interesting question, and we're going to discuss that a little later in the report. But let me get through Obamacare, because Obamacare is a nightmare. And I am sure most of you have seen this, but they do have a toll-free number, 1-800-318-2596, and that pretty much spells out 1-800-FU. And was this done on purpose? I can't believe this just came up randomly, that this number just had all the proper lettering to spell this out. And this is just very interesting that that's what the toll-free number spells out. And if you want to check it yourself, which I did, it's 1-800-318-2596. Now, California has admitted Obamacare interest was inflated almost about 8 times. They pretty much lied. And what has been reported now is that less than 1% actually signed up for Obamacare. And I know on the mainstream media, they're sitting there and they're all out there telling everyone that millions of people are coming to look at Obamacare. But guess what? They're coming to look, but they're not coming to buy, because when they see what it's all about, they leave. And the sales of Obamacare are not, the people who are actually joining up are not there. And if we look at this, California's program registered an estimated 0.58% from the website visitors in the first day. Connecticut only enrolled 167 applicants. And Kentucky was the highest at 5.3%. And there were major bugs in the system. There was also a story on Facebook that a type 1 diabetes person who was making between $45,000 and $55,000 decided to sign up for the silver plan, and he saw the premium at $595 a month with a $14,000 annual deductible. If you don't understand what a deductible is, you have to pay the first $14,000 of your visits to the doctor, plus the $595 every month. So this is a monstrosity. This is not helping anyone. So he has to lay out $14,000 if he goes to the doctor, and still pay almost $600 a month. So the person decided that, oh, I don't want this, so he hit cancel. And you have to remember, the system records everything you do on the system, and it says because you didn't take it, you are now penalized something like $4,000. And if you do not pay the $4,000, they had a list of different terms that different things that would happen to you, where if you didn't pay, they would put they would suspend your driver's license, and if you didn't pay over a certain amount of days, they would put a lien on your home, and if you really didn't make any payments, they would just go in and take it out of your bank account and make a automatic deduction each month from your account. And we can see from Obamacare that this is completely not for the people at all. I mean, how is this better than we had it before? Well, it isn't, because before we had the premiums and they were lower. You weren't forced to take insurance. Insurance companies were competing against each other. Now they don't, because they understand it is mandatory for every single person to have health insurance. If you do not take the health insurance, you are penalized for not taking it, and you are taxed. Corporations are dropping the spousal insurance because they say you are eligible to go on the exchange. They are reducing their costs, and they're increasing the costs of every employee who wants health insurance. So this does not work for the people. So who really benefits from this? Well, the health insurance companies that wrote the core bill, because now they're able to set a standard price and they don't have to compete against each other. The U.S. government, through the IRS, who's allowed to build revenue from those people who don't want it. Who were the losers? The people of the United States. Who were the exempt people? The president and government officials. Now Congress is starting to wake up and see what Obamacare is really like. And they're trying, not very well, to get this defunded and delayed for 1 year. And we understand that this whole entire system has many, many bugs in it and was not ready to go live. And already there was a data leak and people's information was leaked. Their personal medical information for about 2,400 people was released to different organizations because someone sent an unencrypted file to the wrong person. So now there's 2,400 people who have their private information exposed. And we're really, if you really think about it, this insurance that they are pushing on the people, and we're entrusting them with our personal private medical records, is not going to end well. Okay. Now, Idaho police are joining the growing number of departments with military vehicles. And several police departments across Idaho have joined the growing number of states receiving armored military vehicles from the federal government. And many, many states and many counties, along with the help of DHS, have been acquiring these military armored vehicles. We understand that DHS has purchased around 2,700 of these, and now they're supplying them to all local law enforcement. And it has come out that New Hampshire, with the release of some police documents, revealed that the Concord police requested a military vehicle for libertarians and occupiers. Despite having no history of violence, Concord's police chief claimed that the peaceful activist groups were likely to carry out acts of domestic terrorism. These local law enforcement are being fed propaganda from DHS, letting them know there will be domestic terrorists in the country, and you need these armed vehicles to control these people. Speaking about propaganda, Benjamin Netanyahu, is now saying Iran missiles can now reach U.S. or eventually reach the U.S. In his latest propaganda message, he's out there saying, which is today, that Iran is working on an intercontinental ballistic missile that could one day hit the United States. And he's saying that they're not developing these missiles, these ICBMs, for Israel. They're developing them for long-range strikes against America. And these ICBMs can be fitted with nuclear warheads. And he is continually building up this propaganda. It was the same propaganda that we heard from North Korea, where they are building their missiles with nuclear warheads, and that came in the time when North Korea was making the deal with Iran to purchase their oil, bypassing the dollar. Israel, the central bankers, the U.S. government, have been trying to get into Syria and Iran and place them on the U.S. dollar as a reserve currency for over 25 years. And they are still doing the same thing because they do have a plan to get in there no matter what. And he also went on to say that these long-range ballistic missiles have only one purpose in the world. Their sole purpose is to arm them with a nuclear payload. And he told this to Andrea Mitchell on an NBC interview today. Now, We know Netanyahu was trying to push Obama and the Obama administration into making more threats and to getting into Iran, which the U.S. government, central bankers still want to do. They're just trying to figure out a way of creating a false flag, probably with the help of with Israel, to get into Iran. Right now, Israel is lining up anti-Iran security pact with Arab adversaries like Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, and they're creating and getting together to form some type of alliance that will eventually try to get into Iran and remove the government of Iran and then eventually Syria. And that is what is happening at this time. Now, during this shutdown, we've seen many reports that the national parks are shut down, websites are shut down, they can't help cancer patients. But the U.S. government and the CIA have more than enough money to send to and help train Al-Qaeda to be more efficient killers in Syria. And the CIA is expanding a clandestine effort to train opposition fighters in Syria amid concern that moderate U.S.-backed militias are rapidly losing ground in the country's civil war, an anonymous U.S. official said. And what they decided to do is, even though they furloughed, 800,000 non-essential workers, they closed everything so the people can feel it, they were able to send billions of dollars over to Syria to train these people. If you ever notice, they will never let up on their plans to overthrow Assad, their aid to Egypt, their aid to Israel, their aid to Saudi Arabia, their aid to Mali, their aid to Kenya, their aid to everywhere, to Afghanistan. They will never let up, because what they're doing is the U.S. needs to keep, by force, control of all the natural resources and to strike those countries that are trying to get away from the private central Western bank, and they want the U.S. out. Or they need to control those nations, or to create some type of incident if they are making deals with China. And that is something that we saw in Kenya, where they signed a deal to be the clearinghouse for the yuan for China to bypass the dollar. Now, I just mentioned that since the government is on shutdown, the administration gave $445 million to corporate for public broadcasting and $0 to cancer treatments to help those children who have cancer. But they decided to give the $445 million to PBS NewsHour, National Public Radio, instead of helping cancer patients. And this was day one of the shutdown. So you can see where our government officials' heads are. They are doing this purposely and strategically to make sure the American people feel what it is like during this shutdown. Now, the government shutdown isn't slowing down anything for the people who want war and the central bankers with the U.S. government who need to maintain control. And you can see this by the CIA funding the Syrian rebels, the Al-Qaeda Syrian rebels out in Syria. President Obama has waived the ban on aiding regime that use children soldiers, and they're sending over billions of dollars worth of aid to Burma, Sudan, and all those countries that I mentioned in my other report, because he decided to go against the law and go ahead and fund these countries. The Department of Defense will continue to award contracts during this shutdown. No slowing down there. And guess what? The NSA spying center in Utah is still opening. They have not cut anything there whatsoever. And we understand that the government, especially the Obama administration, wants the impact to be felt by the U.S. people. And they do this by shutting down national monuments, by shutting down forests, by shutting down the websites. But what is interesting is that most of this is BS. First of all, shutting down the national parks is such a tiny slice of the federal budget that it doesn't even register. But what's even more interesting, and you can tell that this is a bunch of uh, um, this is a complete strategic move by the Obama administration to make sure that people feel it. If you really think about it, and they keep going on that the websites are down and you can't access them. Well, we have to think for a second here. If the websites are down, how can there be a message on there? There has to be a server that's running the message on these sites, right? Well, I said to myself, let's just do a little test here. I went to Google, and I don't know how many people know this, but if you type in site, S-I-T-E, colon, then the site name, and that would be usda.gov, it will bring up every page that has to do with just that site. Not just the home page, but every other internal page. And I've listed them, a couple of them, on the x22report.com site to prove that these sites are not down. The servers are running, the sites are up. The only thing they did was put a message on the front. So, for instance, if you went to firemapper.sc.egov.usda.gov, you can get to that page. That proves the site is up. And I have other pages listed. Now what happens is they couldn't get a redirection on every single page, and they missed quite a few. And they didn't realize this. So if you do the command that I just told you, it will bring you up a list, and you can go through them. Or I have 4 pages listed on the x22report.com site to prove that these sites are not down. The servers are running. Everything in the computer lab, in the data center, is turned on, running at full steam ahead, and these sites are operational. And there was absolutely no reason to shut these down at all. The only thing they did was to make their point and make the American people feel it. Now, there was an interesting article in Zero Hedge where they're saying that, is this the reason for the annual September fake economic bounce? Because we saw during the summer, and we know that the economy is a complete illusion. We saw housing, being pumped up, and we know why that is. We see the stock market being pumped up, and we saw them talking about rentals. They were talking about auto sales. Everything was being pumped up, and now we're seeing everything decline. And this makes sense to me because in corporations, when your fiscal budget ends at the end of the year and you have money that needs to be spent, you spend it on pretty much anything. So during the month of August, they needed to spend, and July, approaching September 30th, they needed to spend as much as they possibly could, or they wouldn't be awarded the same amount next year, because they would look at it and say, well, you didn't spend this money, so you will get less. So what they do is they were instructed to go out and start purchasing things, which was propping up the economy. And this makes sense of why we saw this huge bump in all the statistics, and not just because of the manipulation, but other things. But now we are seeing a decline in auto sales, especially in the U.S. car manufacturing. We saw a huge bump up during the summer. Was that because the government was purchasing many automobiles from the United States auto manufacturers to pump up their numbers? Because in my last report, it was a huge decline all of a sudden for these car manufacturers. So this could be one reason, and I have it on here on the X22report.com site, and you can take a look at that. Now, Obama is out there saying that it will be impossible to prioritize the U.S. payments. We just can't do it. How would you do this? I mean, if we couldn't pay these people, who would we pick out? Well, I don't know. A family who needs to prioritize because they have no more credit card or they have no credit and they have to live on cash needs to prioritize their lives. I've done it. I don't use credit cards. I've got rid of them a long time ago. And I prioritize with my family. I say, we can afford this today. We can't afford that. You want to do this? Well, we can't get you clothing today. We can only afford this month. This time, we will have to wait until next month. So it is possible. And guess what? Yes. Is it fun? No. Is it possible? Yes. And for him to be carrying on that it can't be done is ridiculous. But to take this one step further, instead of carrying on that he can't prioritize this because if they go into default, the revenues from all the taxes cannot support the government right now because the amount of revenue that they're bringing in is so low, they cannot make all the payments and keep all the programs going, so they're going to have to make cuts. But why don't we take this one step further? And I discussed this in my other report. Instead of relying on the Fed to borrow money with interest, why doesn't the U.S. government start coining its own money with no interest? And now they don't have to borrow. Makes sense to me. I think it's a perfect time to push the Fed aside and say, you know what? We're going to coin our own money and we're going to distribute it throughout the economy with no interest. So we didn't borrow anything. We don't have to borrow anymore. Why don't they do it? Under the Constitution, it allows them to. Now, my title of this report is The Government Shutdown Game, What's the Real Agenda? Now, we understand that during the summer, leading up to now, they were pushing how the economy is getting better, that it was recovering. At the same time, they were trying to get the war started with Syria, to have this incredible event. And they were talking about tapering at the same time. They moved the entire, not the entire fleet, they moved a lot of the ships into the Mediterranean. They had people standing by. They thought this was a go. They thought the American people in Congress were going to be behind them and ready to go into Syria. And the whole thing just fell apart because the American people did not buy their story of this false flag. And now there's evidence that in the areas of Syria, there is no trace of sarin gas. This is what the UN inspectors are coming back with. And this whole story is really starting to fall apart for the chemical attack that the U.S. said happened, which it really didn't. And since this summer, with this push to get into Syria and this push to show that the economy is getting better and this push for taper, all seem to coincide with each other and then started to fall apart. And we saw the taper didn't happen. The event in Syria didn't happen. And there was no one to blame this collapse on the economy. So what we're having now is this shutdown. And we're in, the third day now of this shutdown. And now we see different reports coming out from bankers who met with Obama to let it leak that the economy could really take a hit if the government stays shut down. We see the ECB out there saying that the crisis support can later have perverse effects on the economy. The Fed is out there also saying that if this goes any longer, fourth quarter of the economy is really going to be bad. And here, Fed Lockhart says government shutdown to hurt fourth quarter U.S. growth. and they're very worried about this type of shutdown. Fed Williams was out there saying that the impact of the government shutdown is going to have prolonged economic effect, and it will not end well. And we are seeing this over and over. And the Treasury was out there warning about the default, that this could have a long lasting effect on generations to come. And are they building the agenda of, since everything else didn't work out, that the economy in the fourth quarter is not going to be what everyone thinks it's going to be? It is going to rapidly decline. And during this time, they will use some type of event to cover it up. And it seems like they're putting out the notion now that because of this shutdown, and if it goes any further, that this could be a real big problem. And they're saying that they're already feeling the effects of the shutdown on the economy in the long term. And the Fed might have to stimulate even more down the line because of this. Because really what the Fed wants to do is they really don't want to taper, because they understand if they taper just a little bit and that money stops going into the stock market, people in the market will lose faith. They will not be able to pump up the market anymore, and the market will start to drop. And it will drop pretty darn fast, because we see how fast it is dropping when they mentioned the word taper. And when that happens, the entire thing will start to collapse. And I see that their agenda is starting to push the notion that the fourth quarter is not going to be good for the American people because of what is happening right now. And to push this even further, we understand that there are many drills happening, and I mentioned them many, many times, and many things happening during this late fall, early winter, and we are going to have to see how this plays out. One thing before I end this, we understand there was a shooting in the Washington, D.C., right outside the Capitol building, and a couple things registered with me is, first of all, I saw the video of this black, I think it was a Infiniti coupe, being surrounded by the DC police there, and they all had their guns drawn. And instead of shooting, I mean, the car was stopped, then backed up into a police car with all of them standing around. Instead of shooting at all four tires or shooting at the engines to make the car stall, instead they didn't do anything until the car sped away. And they let the car go, and I saw the chase, and the chase looked kind of lame because they were falling back, letting the car go, and the person finally hit into a barrier, and the person was shot. And I don't know why they had to shoot the person, because I thought that was the last resort. The person had no weapon. They didn't draw any. She didn't draw a weapon. And what was strange is that you heard on the loudspeakers, "Everyone stay in your house, lock your doors, close your windows," because of one person, who's a woman driving in a car with a kid. And I noticed that Washington went on lockdown, and this seemed like it was a training exercise for the people in Washington, just in case something happens there. And this completely looked like some type of training exercise for the police, for the people in Washington, to see how everyone will react if people do march on D.C. And there are plenty marches on D.C. that are coming up. We have the truckers. We have the other march on D.C. to ask for Obama's resignation come November. And this really seemed like something else going on. But we will have to see how this plays out and what spin they put on this, and we'll have to see. Listen, everyone, Thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.